You're listening to the Grassroots Church podcast. We're a Jesus-centered community in Thunder Bay, Ontario. You can learn how to participate more by going to our website at grassroots.church.
Good morning. If you were not with us last week, I thought I'd just do a quick sort of recap. So we are on this very short kind of 2-week series on sharing our faith, on evangelism. We're calling it sharing good news, sparing cringe. I think that's the clever title I came up with. And all fall, we've been talking about this gospel that we proclaim with our lives, this good news of great joy for all people. And we are saying that, this good news is really the story of Jesus, and it's the entire story of Jesus. The story of Jesus from his birth to his death and then into his ascension. And all of that is the gospel. And part of the life of faith, part of being a follower of Jesus is taking this vocation, this call, to not only be reconciling the earth in the way of Jesus and to work with God in his reconciling work, but to also be proclaiming that with our lives. And so last week, we talked about a lot of the tactics that many of us grew up with in sharing our faith that were often very cringy, felt forced, felt somewhat coercive, felt that we were maybe somewhat even inauthentic in many ways. And so we kind of we pushed against that. We challenged that and said, does sharing our faith have to be so flippin' uncomfortable? And the way I understand, the way that I see often portrayed in the gospel, it's not that there's a lack of proclaiming the truth, proclaiming the gospel. There's lots of that. But more and more, we see just the need for our lives to be embodying the story, embodying the good news of Jesus Christ. And so I talked last week about how the best tool we have for evangelism in 2024 in a world that is cynical, in a world that is not open to religion necessarily, that's not open to truth, the best way we can convey the beauty and the hope that we have is by presenting lives that speak to that hope and that beauty in the gospel. And we found that when we do that, it is more authentic, it is more genuine. There used to be a sign on, many of you remember this, on the Grassroots building that was shouted out. Who remembers what the 3 words were? Simple, authentic, and relevant. And honestly, I cannot tell you how many people were brought into the doors of Grassroots Church because they saw those 3 words on the outside. That was who we strive to be, simple, authentic, and relevant. We have a world that is yearning for authenticity. We have the highlight reels of our lives that we post all over social media. People don't connect to that. People connect with authenticity. They connect with being vulnerable, being real. And that includes sharing, yes, the joys of our faith, the beauty and the wonder and just the awe that we have in Jesus and those moments of triumph. But it also includes, being vulnerable includes sharing the struggles, sharing the hardships, sharing the difficulties we have in our faith. And all of that is a form of embodying the gospel and presenting it to a world that says, hey, I can attest to the faithfulness of God. Here's my life. Watch and see. And so this morning I thought that we would bring these 3 lovely souls on to in front of us to share some of their experiences. I know each of them relatively well, some more than others, but I know that they have been members of our community. They have been followers of Jesus for many years, and they are passionate about sharing the hope that is in them with the world around them as well. And so I've actually prepared a set of questions that we're to jump off of, hopefully, to serve as sort of a conversation starter. And I'm just going to hopefully let the conversation go wherever it will, or wherever the Spirit leads. And I invite you, if you have questions, this is informal enough, we're small enough, that if you have questions that you're like, yeah, you know what, I kind of struggle with this. Would you be able to speak to this? That you would feel free, just raise your hand, and we'll get to that as well. So, sound good, everyone? It actually doesn't sound great. No. Okay. We might have to share a mic. Does yours work, Bill?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, and yours works, and we're good? Okay.
We found these
Robin,
20-year-old cordless mics.
You just have to sit there and look pretty, so, okay. I thought we'd start with this question. Can you share a story about sharing your faith with a friend, with a stranger maybe, that you will look back on, that you can look back on, that will give all of us here a sense of kind of your approach and your own understanding of evangelism. And I'm not sure who would like to go first, but I'll give it to Robin. Let's go. Because she doesn't have a mic.
Okay. Yes, well, some of you know that our family has been privileged to host international students through host family programs at the college or university. And so I was actually binge listening to the Grassroots podcast last night because I'd either been in nursery or been away, so I wanted to catch up. Has anyone else ever done that? I listened to a whole bunch of messages that I'd missed. But anyway, one thing that stood out, you talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, with your family, or we had people coming in and living with us. So they definitely saw the good, the bad, and the ugly living with our family. And last year we had a student who, she was a university student, and she was going through some issues with a boyfriend back in her home country, and she shared that they were having some arguments, and she was a lovely lady. She actually liked spending time with me and John. It was quite interesting. I'm like, you want to hang out with us? Oh. Anyway, she asked me kind of like, what's your secret? Why do you and John, she part of her work, she does like romantic photography. So she liked taking pictures of us. Aww. And then I guess she thought, it was pretty great that she could tell we still loved each other after however many years, right? Yeah. So she was asking about that. And so I was able to share, well, actually, it's, from God. It's because of, because we have faith in God and we see Jesus who, we're told to love each other as, as Christ loved the church. And I said, Jesus gave his life for us. And I said, so it's about like not being selfish in our relationship. And I'm very thankful because they can see that in John and how he cares for me. And so that was the stage she was at. We didn't get into a whole lot of, I want to read the Bible or whatever. She did come out to church with us once, but just being, I guess, 1 Peter 3:15 about setting aside Christ, revering Christ in our hearts and being ready to give an answer for the hope we have. So that's a lot of where I think we're at when people who see our lives and they have a question and then we can respond. They're curious.
Right. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thanks.
So don't know? That's where she's at, was at then.
So what I'm gathering is just you folks living out your marriage with love was a testimony to her that's like, well, like, what is behind this? Why do you love each other so much after so many years? And it just really speaks, unfortunately, to how like there's a void of that in society at large, and yet there's a healthy marriage here that seeks to honor God and through a selfless ethic, and we see that selflessness on the cross and we reflect it in our own lives, and so it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'll just share one more thing. There are students who have definitely seen the ugly from me in particular, and so I've had to apologize.
Which in itself is, again, just humility, and that takes a lot. I know I've been there.
So it's not all rose-colored.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Bill, do you want to share?
Sure. When you're 74 years old and have lived a life of various kinds of accomplishments, training, and expertise, you might tend to think that people should come to you and ask for advice. That does not happen. There is a complete lack of respect for expertise, experience, and age in our culture. So I can't rely on that one. Steve talked about the simple, relevant. So I'm the simple one. In my youth, I often engaged as part of our congregation in door-to-door evangelism. It might have been called. It probably was not, but it did seemingly turn lots of people off. I also engaged in a lot of preaching and teaching. Sometimes that was of value. And gradually, I improved to an evangelism style that's attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, who apparently said, "Preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words." And I would describe my current evangelism style as friendship mentoring. I'm somewhere on the spectrum. I never knew that growing up, but as I became a teacher and started to learn about autism, I realized, hey, that sounds familiar. I don't care much about other people or social situations.
Wow, thanks for your honesty.
That's it's not particularly funny, but it helped me understand why I acted the way I did, which was usually badly. I don't read between the lines. I often tell people, don't try to send me hidden messages. I don't read between the lines, and I don't. As a result, I'm terrible at poker because I don't read the expressions on other people's faces or the inflections in their voices. So I have to get by in other ways. And because I really don't care about friends, I don't make friends easily. And when I find a person being friendly to me, I try to grasp that opportunity and get to know the person. And so my evangelism generally trends to be, how are we different? What explains those differences? And since we're both, or at least one of us is intelligent, maybe we can learn something here. Wow. And I have to be just as open to learning as I am to teaching. Yep. And that's kind of the basis of where I go.
That's beautiful. Just that last line, I think, is good for all of us. We all have to be open to learning as well as teaching, right? No matter what stage of life we're at, how much knowledge we've accumulated. That's great, Bill. Thanks. And Matt, you don't shake.
Don't shake the microphone. Can you read the question again?
Sure. Sharing a story about your faith with a friend or stranger, like something in your life that maybe a moment or whatever that you can speak to. It doesn't have to be a moment, but that kind of helps all of us in this room kind of understand sort of your general approach to maybe your general philosophy, so to speak, of how you understand evangelism.
Okay. So my understanding of evangelism, it was a bit of a journey. I grew up in a very evangelical church, and my parents were of that mindset. And I think it's interesting. I look back, not with I would say frustration or wishing that wasn't a part of my past. It's very different than my understanding now. And so that kind of in context, that was the kind of four spiritual laws of evangelism, of like the Roman road. If any of this is familiar, just nod your head or something. The idea that it's kind of, how do you put it? It's less relational based, more goal based of I'm going to lead you to Christ, and then that's great. We're going to move to the next person, or that was the emphasis. Kind of like Bill mentioned, the door-to-door evangelism. I don't know you. We literally did it. We showed up with a light bulb and said, "Here's a light bulb. You could probably use it." Oh wait, there's a message about Jesus on here. It was really great. Not to say that stuff doesn't hit home sometimes, but anyways. My point is, I see value in these moments. There are moments where you're not relationally engaged with an individual, and you're going to have that time. And I use the example of my dad, who is the police officer for many years and retired as a police officer. And he would have people in the back of his cruiser taking them to the remand center in Edmonton. Like, they're going to jail. Like, it's their third strike with drugs, or they're someone who's been on the street, and so on and so forth. He's meeting them at rock bottom, and it's almost like God took that man as a first responder, not only in career but also in faith. And so he was right there at their lowest point. He had so many opportunities where he would just, this is a big moment for you. Yeah. And he'd have a Bible up on his dash, and he would get right into it. And I'm like, and I was kind of raised with the idea, the philosophy, understanding that is evangelism. That's the way it is for everyone. And I don't think it is for me. I don't think that I'm a first responder of that nature. I think some in this room will be. Maybe you're a nurse, maybe you're a doctor, maybe anyone in those environments. Even for myself, maybe I'll find myself, and I have on an airplane at one point had that conversation. But looping it all back around, my understanding of evangelism actually emerged, I think, from the way in which I was evangelized to by people in this community without their knowledge. So back in 2009, my wife and I started coming to Grassroots Church. We met some incredible people, and as we spent time with these people, I without having conversations about Jesus, I had more and more understanding of who Jesus is, more and more understanding of what it means to actually feel loved by someone who's not my father, not my mother, but by someone who I've met and now spent time with, setting up church, putting chairs together, having chili afterwards, these kind of things. It really touched me. Yeah. And out of that, I realized I want to be just like this person because they make me feel loved, not because I felt like that was going to somehow change the world around me. It was because of how loved I felt and how it changed me. And by being changed, I suddenly began to acknowledge and realize, holy smokes, this is actually spilling out in my life. I'm starting to treat other people the way this individual treated me, the way they listened to me, the way they cared for me. Anyways, that's a bit of
no, that's really beautiful. And so you've sought to, based on your experience within Grassroots community, probably other Christians, not just within Grassroots, I'm sure, but within our community, you've seen how they've lived, and you've sought to sort of in turn live that same way to others out there in the world, hey? Can you speak to what that looks like maybe in the work context?
Yeah, I think it's funny how, like, when you're treated a particular way that really impacts you. And some of you here may know the individual I'm going to talk about is Brad Doff is a great example. Brad used to come to Grassroots Church back in the day. He was one on the board and all this. And he was a person, when I would talk to him, he would just, the way he your eyes would meet, he would listen to you, he would ask you questions, and honestly, I'd come away and be like, I don't know anything about Brad Doff, because he only asked me about myself. He made me feel so good. And he'd be like, dude, that's incredible.
Yeah.
He just had this way. He's had this, But in that way, it has this interesting way of causing you to reflect in on yourself and say, man, do I listen to people as well as this person does? Do I make people feel the way that this person has made me feel? Because I want that. And so I didn't adopt as much of the surfer vernacular, but I definitely, felt like I need to listen to people better. I need to hear where they're coming from more. And so you mentioned work context, and I know where you're driving at. I do spend a lot of time out of town. I spend a lot of time working with electricians and crews that I'll pop in and pop out, and we'll work together 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day for a week, and then that'll be it. But then we'll stay in contact by the phone. And I've found that has been an environment where I've been able to practice, I guess, the art or the what we're taught in the fruits of the Spirit of really taking it to the next level and walking into an environment where it may be cold. It may be cold in terms of emotional. There's a lot of like bravado in some of these environments where guys are like, we're building something together. I'm going to yell at you. You're going to yell at him, and we're going to be angry together, but we're going to get the job done. And I would approach it from a different perspective of maybe elevating people personally to a position that they didn't earn professionally. So making them feel like, hey, this, me being, at times, sometimes the lead on site, I will spend time with the apprentices. I'll make sure that we get some time together to really have some focused attention, but in doing so, I really do try and highlight that we're same level, and that I'm interested in them as a person, not as a tool in this environment.
You Brad Doff them.
Yeah. Anyways,
no, that's great.
I could go on, but
no, I appreciate that. So I'm wondering if you folks can speak to, and I don't know if this is anything, but are there elements in your history of sharing the good news, sharing the gospel with the world, are there elements that you tend to focus on and elements that you tend to kind of stray away from? Now we're talking sort of more particulars of our faith, like aspects of the gospel, the good news story about Jesus himself. Is there any of that you would be able to speak to? If not, no worries, we can move on to another question, but I thought I'd just throw that out. No? Yeah? Anyone? Okay.
well,
you want to go?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, why not? I think that, unfortunately, I think there's so much polarization when it comes to conversation that gets to any level of depth when we talk about like values and morals and of course that's linked to faith and religion. And early on, I think in my upbringing, there was an idea that you're going to argue someone into the kingdom of God, and I've pretty much abandoned that approach because people are very ingrained, I find, in their perspective, and so you're not going to out-perspective someone. You're not going to out-argue someone into the kingdom, and so I certainly find that I stay away from any sort of argumentative focus.
Yeah. Doesn't really help. Bill, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I love arguing. Stop saying amen, Wendy.
Stop saying amen.
And I found it to be tremendously effective
Arguing.
in alienating people.
Oh, in alienating. I didn't let you finish there.
I've changed dramatically and maybe diametrically over the years. I started off with zero respect for anybody else's position or opinion. And through humiliation, we hate that word, but we love humble, same thing. And very often it takes a lot of humiliation to make us humble. So God has been able to do some work over the years through humiliating me, and it's been very good for me. So I've got to a position where, as I mentioned before, respect for my friend requires that I be as ready to learn as I want them to be ready to learn. And sometimes, maybe often, it's been they who have evangelized me.
Robin, I wonder if you can maybe speak a little bit about how your approach to evangelism has changed over the years.
So I think growing up in the church and in the wider Christian community, I grew up mostly with the kind of courtroom paradigm about guilty and innocent. And it was really good for me when I moved overseas for a number of years, and I encountered many Christians from different countries. We were all working together from different church backgrounds and cultures. And then also the people I was working amongst, it was, supposedly 99.9% Muslim country. Wow. So I definitely was a learner, a lot of listening, but also the paradigm, realizing that I came from a very individualistic society, and moving to a very collective society, and also one that's more honor shame based and very much sacrifice based. The biggest festival has to do with the sacrifice that we share with Abraham preparing to sacrifice his son. So there were a lot of bridges and then a lot of differences as well. But I think just encountering, that really widened my world and my perspective. And I had the chance to also study scripture with some of the other workers who were there, who came, some very, very, Anyway, so I learned a lot from just interacting with them as well as from the local people and reading books like Kenneth Bailey, through the gospel or the cross through Jesus through Middle Eastern eyes. And because the culture I was living in there was so much closer, it's a Semitic culture, and so much closer to what the biblical Hebrew culture. So, as well as the language being close. So that was, I'm really thankful for those experiences. And in a way, it was, even though we were in a country where we had friends who were actually killed for their faith, even though we, in a way, it was still a lot easier because people were very curious.
Yeah, they're more spiritual.
Yeah, they would just right away come up to you in the street. Are you a Muslim? And then you'd get to talking about it, right? Yeah. And because we were from a more powerful country or whatever, that was kind of, we had the freedom, even though maybe not by law or whatever. But so then bringing all that with me, coming back here, again, I really believe the community is important. So I love to see, like, Charlene, I don't know if it's full yet for that sign up for people to work together. I don't even know, I don't see Charlene. I think she's in nursery. The opportunities where we can serve together in community, you don't have to be married for people to see Christ in action in a community. And so I just think, and that's partly why in my workplace I find it more challenging, because it's just me amongst all my students. And I really believe, because God in himself, there's the mutual submission, and there's so much in the scripture about love each other, do this to each other. So I think moving overseas to a more collective culture really helped me realize more about, it's not just about me, but the community is so important. So I think I digress.
That's great. Bill, did you want to add anything?
I would just say that the main distinctions in my approach are between people who profess belief and people who do not. So when people do not profess belief, then I take a more investigative approach. Why are we so different? And in people who express belief, like Steve, then I take that as a teaching opportunity to try to fix his heresy.
Got a long way to go. Bill and I have had many a conversation over the last little while about the different elements of faith that we may or may not agree on. That's fine. All in love.
Yeah, so in reality, I look at non-believers as not having any basis in their personal philosophies for living in a particular way that I might expect them to. If they don't believe, why do I expect them to act like I do? Yeah. So I have to examine that belief versus non-belief issue.
Yeah, that's great.
And in believers, then I can consider that more. We're coming from the same perspective. Here's what I teach. Here's my theology. Can we grow in that?
I'm wondering if there's any questions or comments any of you may have for the panel that you can just raise your hand and share if anything's coming to mind. Joseph? Yeah. I'm going to repeat your question for everyone to hear. Okay, so go ahead. So he's asking, he says, many believers profess their belief in church, but then as soon as they leave church, as soon as they're outside church, they are no longer believers. What do you say to that? Take a stab at that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think that the way that can be perceived is twofold. One is a responsibility on the individual, and one is a responsibility of the church. And I've been part of church communities and other than Grassroots Church, where it is harder to be I think a fruitful follower of Christ, and by fruitful I mean truly like someone who's showing Christ to the world. Like that, to me, that's fruitful. I think it's harder in a community where your community, your church doesn't bleed over. Literally, like the actions, the activities, the engagement doesn't bleed over to your week. If it doesn't continue, if you don't have any sort of Christian community besides an hour and a half on Sunday morning, then that's actually, I don't think that's the church that Christ described. And I think we really do need to be plugged into a community of support so that it transcends Sunday morning and permeates our day to day.
Yeah.
But for the individual, I guess it's also the responsibility of the individual to maintain disciplines that are in excess, in addition to, again, an hour and a half on a Sunday morning. And for me, what that looks like is actively every day acknowledging and admitting to myself that I'm actually a very selfish, very prideful person unless I abide in Christ. And so that looks like in the morning spending some time journaling and praying, and it's not to be like, oh, I'm so terrible, and then just going about the day being, feeling terrible about myself. But I think it's an acknowledgement of all that I'm about to engage in throughout the day, and making a cognitive and purposeful decision to be like Christ in whatever situation I'm about to encounter, or the ones that we don't know we're encountering. It's so active. You just cannot be passive about this. You cannot show up and be like, wow, we had a great worship on Sunday, so this week's going to be a banger. Like it's just not like that.
It doesn't work that way.
Anyways, I know Bill's got something to say.
No ladies first. Before I forget, that's the bigger problem for me. There were all kinds of sinful people in Jesus' day. And he had loving, welcoming, kind words for them. Except for the religious people who left church and became monsters. Mm-hmm. And he called them hypocrites. He used a really disgusting term for them, whitewashed sepulchres. You look good on the outside, but you're full of dead man bones. Yeah. So that's how Christ felt about those people who become monsters outside of church.
I was just going to mention what Matt was saying about being active. Sounds like the scriptural, clothe yourselves with Christ and put on the armor of God. Yep. Recognizing that we are in a battle. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Recognizing we're a little bit short on time, I'm going to skip a few of these questions. How have you built authentic relationships with people who might not share your beliefs, first of all? And how have these relationships opened doors perhaps for sharing? Does anyone able to speak to that? Robin will take it.
Yeah, so here I work in an environment where we have a lot of different cultures, a lot of diversity, and some of you, I guess most people do. I'm with the Multicultural Association, so that's to be expected.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is, like we said, the listening, the curiosity, just really genuinely wanting to understand people. And again, the humility, like I said, I have to apologize many times, working with coworkers. Sometimes it's like a pressure cooker. Probably many of you feel like that in your workplace, but so when I'm in my classroom, we've got the different languages, cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and trying to read the liturgy backwards reminded me of what some of my students must feel like when they're learning to read English. So that was a good reminder to me. Yeah. But it's like a pressure cooker. Many of them have traumatic. They come from war zones. It's just sometimes a pressure cooker. So. So just being the love is patient, love is kind, and then when I fail at that, which I do, they're adults, and I apologize, and it's not always fun.
Yeah.
And I wish I hadn't messed up in the first place, but I apologize, and then we go from there. Even just yesterday, myself and a student, we had a little talk before class started, and we said we both apologized. Then we said, okay, we're going to move on together. Yeah. And then with the staff, if I'm offended or possibly offended by something, I try to make the time to meet with them and go through this. Look, let's work on this together. So it's the kind of conflict resolution skills I think are really important in my situation. Yeah.
Are there, just on that note before you move on, are there challenges to speaking specifically about Jesus in your workplace? Like, are there rules against doing that?
Yeah. I'm not really sure if there are rules, but for me, because I'm working with people who are vulnerable, and so I'm very aware of my power dynamic. The power dynamics. So it's very much we try to hear from everybody. Yeah. And then there are opportunities teaching Canadian culture. You know, sometimes we'll look at greeting cards for a lesson, say, oh, this one has Santa and this one has Jesus. Well, why is that? Yeah. And so some people learned that Jesus is not Santa Claus. That's what one of my students learned that. But anyway, so it's just trying to be authentic, right? Yeah, simple, sure. Authentic, relevant. There we go. But I don't know about the specific policies. I think it's just being respectful and listening to where people are coming from. Yeah.
Bill, do you want to say anything? No? Okay. All right. So people are turned off by ulterior motives. We all are. Those we engage with about our faith are they can see through that right away. I said last week, the BS radar in our society is extremely high. People are very suspicious of inauthentic motives. And so sort of on that note, how have you navigated the reality of pursuing an authentic relationship while also earnestly wanting folks to come to Jesus?
That's like my answer to all questions of theology. It's complicated.
Yeah.
That is a very mountain-sized challenge. You really need to decide to participate in areas of their interest, and yet you can't fake being interested in what they're interested in. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who doesn't read or understand social situations very well, that's pretty difficult for me. So I tend to try to become involved in, and I tend to become involved in people who are doing things that are in my interest areas. Yeah. And it's a big challenge for me to try to fake being interested in something else. I'm not good at faking, period. I guess the best way I can describe doing that is by, as I mentioned before, exploring differences and explaining that the reason behind my differences is because I value certain things that I think are of eternal importance. And I hope by them coming to understand why I feel the way I do about certain lifestyle choices, that will inform them and maybe interest them. Nothing always works, but everything is worth trying.
Sure. Yeah.
That's good. I'm going to jump in. I think one thing that has impacted how these relationships have grown in my sphere, in particular work, because it feels like all I do is I have work, family, and church, and it feels like work's a lot these days. But I many years ago let go of the idea that we are an us and them, believers and non-believers, and so quantifying someone kind of the day that I meet them as non-believer, and then I'm going to act a certain way around them or talk a certain way around them. So working in electricity, taking that opportunity to be like, who else is the greatest power, just like electricity? I don't do that.
You don't do that?
No.
Oh, man, missed opportunity.
I don't. But so that's important. So seeing people as people, and Robin raised a really great point, is first pursuing and understanding where someone's coming from. That is, I absolutely, it's like finding gold and it's sometimes it's painful for someone else to share a painful thing that's happened in their life, or someone I just worked with recently, a young man, kind of got talking about visiting his mom, so we talked about divorce and these kind of things and the pain in his life. But with that, there's so much richness when you enter into those vulnerable topics. And I, again, going back to the idea of church and how we need to be plugged in, I'm thankful and grateful. My best friend is is a surgeon when it comes to that stuff in terms of getting someone to open up and be vulnerable. If you've ever been in a room with Steve besides church and sitting down for a meal, within half an hour, either he's crying, well, he's crying, and you're already into some deeply vulnerable topic. I can't do that. I can't bring people there as quickly as he does. But it's not for any particular reason. It's because I'm spending a long time with these people, and we're not talking, or we're listening to terrible music. So it'd be great to have a real conversation. Yeah. So I try to go out for lunch with guys when I'm working with them and get into it. Think like, what would Steve ask? WWSK
Stop
or SA. No. And it has helped. It really has. Because but it's never been, or it has not most recently been just kind of waiting and itching to be like, okay, now we're going to say the sinner's prayer. It's truly, I now have friendships and relationships where guys are like, hey, we just had our baby. They send me a picture and they live in, outside of Windsor, and I don't see them that much, but that's the relationship we have now. And I think it's because I've talked to them about my dad passing away and how it hurt and and then it helped other individuals talk about how they lost their mom to cancer or things like this. And we just get talking, and then we talk about church. It just is natural. And that is so important because, like you said, the BS meters are high. And I know I would be turned off if someone was just like poking and prodding me to be like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? It's just, you're not going to be sending, I'm not going to be sending you pictures of my baby. That's not a relationship. And anyways, I think there's beauty in that.
That's great. That kind of reminds me, those who are in home groups who are doing the Practicing the Way series, the video series on spiritual formation. This past week, we looked at pain and suffering. Raise your hand if you've seen that video series, or that video. Yeah, so a few of us have. And we had just great conversation. I think the point that was made, or one of the lessons that was drawn from that, was just recognizing how our pain connects us to each other. And so finding, if you've gone through trauma, if you had tragedy in your life and stuff, being able to connect with other humans really opens up dialogue, conversations. Like, here, I'm exposing my heart. I'm exposing the crap that's happened to me, the trauma I've gone through. I'm exposing that to you, and like kind of, you can do what you want with that. And when you do that, time and time again, it's, at least this is the case in my life, and Matt's just testifying to this as well, that when you do that, people respond likewise. They're like, oh, you mean I'm not the only one in life who's gone through hard things? Here's what I've gone through. And that just opens up conversation and opens up so much potential for connecting and sharing hope. And I, I'm not the world's greatest evangelist by any means, but I find like in those moments I have often, not always, but often I have taken that moment and been like, yeah, if I don't have Jesus, I don't know how I would have gotten through this. And it just opens up this like, oh, so you're one of those guys. Yeah, I am, but I'm not the weird kind. And then, and then it just opens up such a great conversation about faith. And it's sincere, and it's not coming with any agenda, or it's not loaded with any kind of like, I got to get you on my side over here. But it's just being like honest. And so many people's lives have been touched through that. And I think just that it's weird. It's ironic to say that our pain is the avenue to which we can be healed. So, I think that's enough. I think that's a great note to end on, if that works for all of us. Thank you so much. Can we give these three a hand? Wait, are there any other questions? No? Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's just pray, and as they do that, I'm going to invite the band to come up, and we'll sing a closing song and take communion. Father, thank you so much for these three who have joined me on stage, who've shared their hearts, shared the challenges that they've had, shared some of the joys they've had as well, in speaking about you and proclaiming your good news. Lord, the theme, it seems to me, is just the importance to be living lives of authenticity, lives that seek to follow in the way of Jesus. And we recognize that we all fall short of that. We thank you for grace. We thank you for your continued forgiveness and acceptance and drawing us close to you. Thank you for your Spirit that works with us. Would you be with Bill and Robin and Matt in their witnessing to you throughout their lives? Would you be with each of us in this room as we testify to you? Would you be with us as a community, that we would be a light to this city, to this world, that people would be drawn to you through us, through our witness, through how we love, through how we are vulnerable and open. And Lord, that we would take those opportunities and point people to you. And so now as we gather around the cup and the bread and the cup, I pray, God, that you would, your Spirit would speak to us, that you would remind us why we gather and how this good news saturates all aspects of our life, how your reconciling work begins in us and spreads out to the world.